Hello and welcome to Retro Breeze. Today we're taking an extreme close-up look at the tiny titan that is the Miyoo Mini. You'll see extreme over-the-top detail like texture, button movement and more on a really tiny scale. Please check out my other macro video for the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus and be sure to subscribe, like and comment if you enjoy this video. Now let's jump right in. First up we have the D-pad. The engravings are shallow but very high quality, and the whole thing has a soft rounded feel and a slightly gritty texture. Here I'm actuating the switches. The D-pad is very light, requiring little force to actuate. I think this is a good thing for the Miyoo Mini because it means you don't have to apply excess pressure whilst having your hands clutched around such a small device. This means it's comfortable to use over longer periods, despite the small size. It's very easy to actuate in two directions at once at a diagonal as well. Really, this requires minimal pressure. Here's an angle from above. Check out the flared shape of the D-pad. The tips are substantially higher than the middle, which adds to an already comfortable design. Here I focused on the left and right directions. See how the button doesn't go anywhere near flush with the case, which is just great. Next to the D-pad, you'll find this small, recessed function button that is made of gritty grey plastic. Note that mine has a little nick in it. The actuation is just a clicky tactile switch, and the button itself actually rotates 360 degrees. At the bottom center you'll find the start and select buttons, which are made out of the same grey textured plastic. Also, we see the recurring printed blue labels. I love that they angled these buttons, they look very smart and very classic. Here they are from another angle. Trust me, this was super hard to get a good focus on. They have a surprising amount of travel, and they also have quite a lot of tilt from the center point. One last stop before the face buttons. Here's the speaker grill. 4 cutouts, but only 2 actual holes. The bottom right corner of the Miyoo Mini folds downward, which is a nice retro design detail that brings this device even closer to its Game Boy aesthetic. Alright, without further ado, let's look at the face buttons. The buttons are super shiny, glossy, slippery, and prone to causing very unattractive reflections while recording. Really though, they're super smooth and actuate very easily, though a bit stiffer than the D-pad. Overall, they're very comfortable buttons. You can also see the blue printed labels here as well. Now let's take a closer look at the A button. Notice how all of these buttons have a slanted cutout. I really like this look. The buttons move around quite a bit in the case, but that's not a bad thing, just an observation. Here's the B button. Something that Miyoo did so well with this handheld is that the D-pad and buttons are much bigger than you might expect on a handheld this size. It really is well made and well designed. Here's why. I'll give this a poke for you to see as well. And finally X. All of the buttons are completely free of defects, by the way, surprising quality for the price. Now let's take a look at the bottom side. Here we have a headphone jack, SD card and slot, and a USB-C connector. Pretty standard stuff. Here's the top side, with 3 LEDs and the power button. The rightmost LED lights up green when you press the power button to turn the device on. The others light up during charging and stuff like that. Here's the power button. This one is also recessed, which helps to avoid accidental presses. It has just a little bit of movement in the case, but almost no travel. Just a clicky switch and works perfectly well for its purpose. Here's the volume wheel, and I totally love this thing. It's tough to get a focus on because it's heavily recessed and rounded, which is always tricky. Anyway, you'll also notice the slightly janky plus and minus labels. I'm not sure why these are so off compared to the rest of it. The wheel is very stiff, surprisingly so you're unlikely to roll it by accident. It also just barely sticks out from the case, like maybe 1/10 of a millimeter maximum. Now we'll look at the somewhat weird shoulder buttons. Right away you can see that they have a very rough, sandy texture. Check out this audio from the original recording where I scratched the surface. It's a much different feeling from the rest of the case. I'm guessing it's like this to make them feel distinct under your fingers, and maybe to give them a bit more grip as well. And they're clicky but not too much. I suspect there's some rubber in here to cushion the click a bit, but I'm not too sure. Note how the lower outer corner of these buttons is curved inward to match the curvature of the case. The R2 and L2 are ever so slightly raised and have a little bit of a different shape than the other shoulder buttons. The feeling of the buttons is the same though. Here on the R2 you can see how it's so gritty that it's actually picked up some dirt. I flipped this one upside down on the left side for better lighting. Just look at how super rough the buttons are, it's like sandpaper this close up. Here's yet another angle for the shoulders. It was tough to get a decent angle that wasn't just straight on. As you can see, there's a little lift to these buttons and hey, it's smooth on the underside. One more angle here. Look at the contrast between the smooth case and the gritty button. You can really see how they're both different. Alright, we've talked about gritty textures enough. Here's the battery cover as it sits on the case. It's very consistent with not a gap out of place. Also check out this ribbed design. It's very consistent, high quality, and the rounded edges keep the Mini very comfortable. This design makes it much easier to keep hold of while you're playing. Finally, here's the clasp. Pretty standard stuff really. It just lifts and releases. I actually find it kind of stiff to release by hand though. Here's the underside of the battery door, which is naturally much less presentable than the other side. Note that on the edges we see the return of that gritty texture from the triggers. Now a close-up look at the battery as it sits in the case. This is the new version, so it's a more component-like battery. Here's the battery board under some Clapton tape. And here's the cables, which go into a standard connector. In the center, it's labeled Miyoo 80-40-50, which means 8mm by 40mm by 50mm, the physical dimensions of the battery, 2000 mAh, 3.7 volts, 7.4 watt-hours, and 2022-03, the year and month of manufacture. Wow, this is really new. I've removed it from the case, so here's the underside of the battery. There's nothing printed here. Here's the cables and the connector. Now let's look at the inside of the case without the battery. Here you can see the little slots for the battery cover, and some covered internal component. I'm not actually sure what this is or why it's exposed like this. It's pretty plain in here, but here's a Phillips screw. The bottom side is a little bit more interesting. Here we can see a part of the headphone jack, SD tray, the clasp, and of course the battery connector. And up here there's a second Phillips screw. Back on the front, notice that my unit has a minor defect. Some sort of glue or plastic or something that is hardened on here. I couldn't get it off with isopropanol. I was thinking of scratching it off, but it's really not a big deal, so I've just left it there for now. Oh, before I forget, here's a look at the texture on the front of the Miyoo Mini. It has a kind of resistive feeling. Not really rough to the touch, but not really smooth either. It feels kind of like paper, actually. Almost done. Now we'll look at the screen and how it sits in the case. The Miyoo has a clean and quality construction, and this part is no different. Notice how the edge of the screen are slightly rounded. It really emphasizes the screen at the center of this device. The bezels on this thing are just amazing. Oh look, here's the volume wheel sticking out the tiniest amount from this angle. Finally, we'll take a look around the seam between the two halves of the Miyoo Mini case. For the most part, the seam is flawless. Hey, take a look on the bottom here. With the battery removed, you can see all the way through the headphone jack. See my pokey tool back there? Anyway, let's bring this video to a finish by looking at the rest of the seam. And there we go, an ultra close-up look at the Miyoo Mini. If you liked this video, please leave a like and also check out my Retroid Pocket 2 Plus macro video as well. Please consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this, and be sure to leave a comment with the device you'd like to see me take a look at next. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, RetroBreeze will see you next time.